We're going to show you some simple mold making techniques with silicone rubber to allow you to create casts of objects in pigmented acrylic 1. So we're going to do molds in 3 ways. This first one is going to be using foam board, and we're actually going to make a box. So I'm using my object that I'm going to cast. I'm just measuring out, marking the sides of the box. Allow a little bit of space. In terms of space around the object, we want enough that we're not going to have any really thin sections on our mold, but we don't want to make the box so big that we end up wasting our rubber. So with our pieces cut, we're just lining everything up, making sure it all fits. And once we're happy, we're going to go in with a hot glue gun. This is a great way to attach the box together and also seal those edges. The silicone rubber can get into lots of small gaps, so you really want to make sure those edges are nicely sealed, that your mold box doesn't leak when you pour the rubber in there. So we're working all the way down the edges with the glue. And this sets quite quickly, so it's a really great way to hold a box together. So removing the object before we put our final side on. So we're putting the object back in, so we're ready to our pour. This is a 2-part platinum cure silicone. We're using FS20 in this case. We've made sure that we've got enough space and even space around the object. We've vacuumed this in a vacuum chamber to remove as much air as possible. We're just gently pouring it to one side of the object and let the mold box fill evenly. The curing time will depend on the rubber you've used. For our one, it's about 20 to 25 minutes. So now we can prise the mold from the mold box. So now we can open the mold up. The first thing is to cut a curved line. This will just help the mold locate back together when we close it back up. Next, we're going to gently cut to the part inside, so being as neat as possible here and taking care not to damage the object. So now that we've taken that out, you can just have a look inside the mold, make sure that there's no debris. We've made sure that the mold is located back together properly. We've gone around it with parcel tape just to hold it in the right position and make sure that the material isn't going to force it apart. This is our acrylic 1, all mixed up and pigmented. Once again, pouring to one side of the mold to avoid trapping air. After an hour, we can demold our cast. So we're starting by removing our tape from the outside. Now we can begin to open the mold. If yours is a fragile piece, take care not to damage the part as you remove it from the mold. If you have any visible mold lines, just carefully remove them with a scalpel. This next mold is going to be much thinner and flatter. So we're going to mark around the piece that we want to mold on a piece of foam board. And then we're going to use plasticine or clay just to build a very low wall, just to hold our rubber in place. So working our way around the edge, making sure that the clay is pushed down firmly, using my thumb to just smooth the back of it into the board to make sure we're not going to get any leaks when we pour our rubber into there. The height of this wall is determined by the part that we're trying to cast, so we want enough height that our rubber is going to be able to cover the part, plus an extra bit of thickness so that our mold isn't really thin and fragile above the part that we're trying to cast. So just finishing off, making sure the whole edge is sealed. We've used our pen line just to give us a good estimation of where it needs to be. Now I'm just using a clay tool to work my way around the edge, just to make the edge of my mold neat. We don't want the rubber getting in underneath the clay wall, forming a ridge. It's just for neatness sake, this really. Now with our previous object, it was heavy enough that it would just sit on the base of our mold box. This object is so lightweight that the rubber will float it if we pour rubber all around it, so we need a way of securing it to the bottom of our mold. Here I'm just using double-sided tape. You could use spray glue, anything that's not going to interfere with the silicone. So just pressing down firmly to make sure it's all fully attached to the foam board behind. And now moving on to creating the mould. So we've pigmented our rubber for this one. That's just going to help us to see how much coverage we've got on top of the object. If we had this clear, it's sometimes difficult to know how well you've covered it, so a little bit of pigment can help here. We're going to leave that for another 25 minutes to set. Now we can demold. So we're going to take the whole piece off the foam board. Our clay can be reused, so we'll just put that to one side. The part in this case is flexible, so I'm not going to break it, so I'm not being too careful at this point. If you do find that you've got a thin film of silicone that's got in behind your object, you might just need a small pair of scissors or a scalpel just to remove that at the edges from the back of your mould so you can release your part. And there we have it. Once again, we have our acrylic one all mixed up. So now we're just adding some pigment and giving it another thorough mix to make sure that the pigment is evenly spread without any streaks. We're going to take a bit of care pouring this in because this is a very thin mould with thin sections such as the tail and the legs. So I'm starting on the biggest part and working my way into the thinner sections, letting the resin run in. Finally here, we're just going to scrape the back of the mould just to remove any excess and get a nice thin casting. We've waited for an hour, so now we can demold. Taking a lot more care with this one because we have a lot of thin sections. We don't want to snap anything off, so just gently prising the mould away. For our final cast, we're going to do another box mould. This time we're going to make the wall in a different way. We're going to use some Lego bricks. You can use a lot of different things for building mould boxes with. I quite like this for small objects. Yeah, it's very easy to reuse them. It doesn't tend to leak through because of the complex way that the bits fit together. So I've just started with my part in place so that I can see how big I need to make my box. And now we're just building it up. I have a piece of foam board below the bricks, so you can just use a glue gun and once again secure that white base, or even blue tack or double-sided tape. So just building it up to the required height. Fill in any sections of the part that you don't want to get rubber in with clay. And now we're just using a little bit of spray wax as a release agent before we put in our rubber. So pouring to one side of the object, letting the mould box fill. Once again, we've secured our part to the bottom of the box so that it doesn't float when we pour our rubber around it. Making sure it's well covered right up to the top. And after waiting 25 minutes, we can demold. So removing our bricks, a lot of the kind of extra rubber that you can see we can just cut away with scissors, anything that's flowed between bricks or around the top. Now we can remove our parts. This is a solid metal, actually a pencil sharpener, so we know we're not going to damage it. So I'm getting my fingers in around it and just prising it away, and then just popping it out of the mould. So once again, this is an open back mould. We're just going to, what was the base of it is now going to be our area where we can pour. So pigmenting our acrylic one. Decided just to add a little bit more. The amount that you put in will obviously determine how dark or a stronger colour you get mixed with that milky white base material. Now we can go straight into our mould with our acrylic one, filling it up slowly so as not to trap air, and waiting an hour before we demold our part. So this one It's small enough that we can just prise the mould and pull it out from the back. Here are our castings next to their original objects. You can see just how much fine detail the acrylic one will pick up from the silicone mould. We've just coloured these simply with pigments, but you can add in whatever additives you want to get the look that you want to go for. We can also seal these now to make them waterproof and weatherproof if we want to put them outside.